Hola, bienvenidas a todas. Hello, welcome everybody. Este centro de compasión será interpretado del inglés al español. Si usted necesita interpretación, favor de llamar al 978-990-5357 y marque el código de acceso 391-822 y símbolo de número cuando se le pida. Por favor, mantenga su micrófono en mudo en la línea telefónica, al menos que quiera hacer una pregunta. This Compassion Center will be interpreted from English to Spanish. To access Spanish interpretation, please call 978-990-5357 and dial the access code 391-822 # when prompted. Please keep your microphone on mute on the phone line. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you, Naida, and welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to have you back here today and to have my very special guest with us today, René Garcia Hernandez. And I was very honored that René accepted my invitation. René, pronouns he, him, elle, is an educator, a community advocate, and a fearless and tireless advocate for social justice. And René identifies as a queer male of color, first-generation Latinx, and I'm also first-generation immigrant, a leader, an educator, very grounded in wellness and healing, working with youth and families, working with just communities right now, and he'll be sharing some of the exciting work that they're doing. But mainly, he's an advocate for the members of our community who may not have their own voice or their way of finding and accessing some of the resources and healing that we have in Santa Barbara. So I am honored that René is here with us today. So welcome.
Thank you, Gina. Thank you all who are watching. For being here and sharing the space with us. I'm excited to have our conversation.
Yeah. And when René, you and I were speaking about, there are so many topics that we could talk about, so many things that are going on currently. I mean, there were 1,000 things. So we wanted to narrow it down to the issues that are in our heart right now with COVID, with the racial issues that have been erupting all over the country and all over the world. And all of the families that we know, and I'm working directly with, who may be undocumented, who may have absolutely been silenced, put aside, not talked about. We thought it would be a very important topic to, let's talk about what we're not talking about. Let's have those conversations that we're not seeing out there about what is it that is happening in our community right now with these families that we're really not sharing and we're really not bringing to the light. So that's why we wanted to have this conversation, René and I, about giving voice to what's been silenced in our community. So I wanted to ask you, René, in your work with youth and with families, which I know is extensive, what are you seeing that a lot of the community may not be aware of? What are some of the issues or some of the situations that you feel are not being addressed currently? And so
Thank you, Gina. Yeah, beautiful question. But first and foremost, before we begin the conversation, I just like for our audience, this is a welcome, this is an invitation to you all to open your heart, open your mind, and go on this conversation and journey with us today. I'd like to share a little bit more about myself and honor, those generations that came before me, and specifically a shout out to my mama. So a little bit about me quickly is that, and this is how I've become to be the person that I am. So first and foremost, I really, really would like to state that I would not be the leader that I am or the person that I am if it wasn't for my strong, courageous, and loving mother, Juanita Garcia Hernandez Niño Mora, who has truly shared with me what wisdom, inspiration, bravery is, and what it is to take action and find my voice, you know, so that it won't be silenced. So she has taught me, you know, that I truly matter and that las vidas negras importan, Black Lives Matter, and have to thank her for me being in this space today. More to know about me and why I'm honored to now find myself in these platforms to be able to voice some of my personal experiences, but also the authentic, real experiences of others who have gifted me the permission to talk about these realities, is that, you know, throughout my life, I have faced and overcome many adversities that have truly taught me what I am and what not to be. So from these adversities, from being displaced and temporary homeless, from coming from a household where there was a lot of physical and emotional violence and abuse, and truly coming from a place where I'd have to dismantle first generational chains of psychological harm and emotional harm, is how I have come to be who I am today and to lead authentically as a servant leader and be honored to serve the community alongside them. So with that said, you know, my mama always shared that my grandpa, may he rest in peace, I never got to meet him. I haven't met my biological family besides my mom and my sister, but he always said, tell your historia, di tu cuento, tell your story. So he passed that down, that legacy down, so that we can allow, you know, people to identify with each other, with me. Please identify with me in some way, and to remind us and remind myself in the work that we all have similarities in common and that we're human. So that's a little bit of where I'm coming from, and I invite you to listen. Yeah.
I just want to say that thank you, because we are a story, you know, our life is a story and our stories are healing. And by telling our stories, we can allow the movement of someone else's story, because identification is what gives us the roadmap. So by you sharing, and I was honored that you shared that, because it is it's a very personal feeling of whether a person feels safe enough to share their story. So I was honored that you felt safe enough to share it with me and with Santa Barbara Response Network. But working as I do in mental health and in suicide prevention, the most effective and documented research, effective way to reach someone who is in a mental health crisis or a suicidal crisis is to give them a story of hope and resilience. Much more than even other interventions. It's been proven. So what you're doing and what you're sharing is what your grandfather said is absolutely right. Tell your story, because your story will help heal. People believe people who have been through it. You walk the walk, people know. They pick it up. They know the truth. So by you starting the conversation on a deeply personal level will allow those listening to also let down their guard and reflect on their story. So thank you, René, for that.
Thank you, Gina. And that's what I mean by authentic leadership. We've always heard of leadership in our community, and it's important to be authentic and remind ourselves, ground ourselves, take care of ourselves, so that we can continue to make this, create, you know, and develop this positive change that is very much necessary, especially in the times that we're living in. So let's get to the questions.
What are you seeing? I mean, really, what are you witnessing, and what aren't we addressing, and who aren't we listening to right now?
Absolutely. Yeah, unfortunately, you know, I'm going to speak to some disparities and inequities that have existed prior to the pandemic, particularly around mental health and undocu folks. So currently, I do work with just communities. I'm program coordinator And I've had the honor to be working alongside youth and really challenging myself also. I've always thought I was a youth ally, or that I was doing work well, you know, for youth. But through this experience, I've been very blessed to learn how to check myself, check the adultism that I have perpetuated, and really challenge myself as a creator, as someone who's creative and hopes to continue to be innovative in many of the multidisciplinary areas that I'm involved with. Through this work with youth work, I really learned to look at processes and procedures and challenge, like, how does it look like to work alongside youth, and to listen to them and really not elevate their voice, but really authentically hear what they're saying and what they need and want, and how do we provide that for them, right? Or maybe it's already there. It's just, how do we truly trust and be fearless in doing the work with them? So amongst youth, though, in all the great work that they have been doing and have allowed me to take part in, there's a lot of, and this is also because of the pandemic, a lot of mental health issues that have been rising, and through these stories that I'm hearing and realities, you know, especially the cultural stigma. I really wanted to speak to that today, that a lot of our underrepresented youth are talking about. So Black youth and Latinx youth particularly. Although I will say I work very predominantly with Latinx youth because I am that mirror for them. I am that representation that they need, and have guided Black youth who have come to me, you know, to the folks that they can relate to, because that's where that needs to happen. But there's this high demand and need. I feel like we're not talking about mental health. And I'm talking also, I really want to highlight it today, the things that need to happen systematically around mental health education. You and I were both on a panel last week, I believe, advocating for this, how we need mental health education in all our education systems, from K-12 to higher education, and how we really need to allow folks to understand that it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to address their needs and wants. So that's something that I'm hearing that youth are still a big need of. And we really need to name that these folks that are providing these resources, we need representation. We need Black therapists. We need therapists of color who our youth can relate to and truly go to authentically and be able to get that service from. So that's really what I'm hearing from the youth work that I'm doing, and a big need in our community. And curious, you know, this is just the beginning of the conversation, as you and I were talking about earlier with other folks. How can we collaborate as a community to really reframe, you know, the policies and systems so that more of our youth can either take that career path and become those mirrors and that representation, or how can we find, you know, better ways of allowing folks to understand what they're feeling. And now I'm speaking to the need of mental health in early childhood education. I had some of the community work I've done has been in the early childhood education field, and that was a big need. You know, we saw a lot of our families that I got to work with not understanding themselves. What is the difference between being angry or frustrated? What's the difference between being depressed or just being sad? You know, or whatever the emotion was. So there's so much need to an opportunity for us to collaborate and think, how can we do this type of education and provide it at an earlier age to be, you know, to really prevent it from happening versus being reactive to it later, which I feel that's where we're at, and curious, you know, and wanting to, like, let's step up, let's be fearless and talk about this, and have youth at the table, have them participate and really tell us what is it that they really want and need, and how they want to envision this, you know. So that's just a little bit of the work that I'm doing with youth, and a hot topic that's really coming up in every time that I interact with them.
Yes, and when we spoke recently with the youth on this panel, we were considered adult allies. It came really clear to us that they know what they need. They really know what they need. And when, after the protests that happened, they went to the school board, as we know, and came up with a series of demands, which are being addressed, I believe, Renee. I don't know if you have any more updates on that, but they really clearly articulated what the like as you stated, what we need in the education system, what we need as far as mental health services, what we need as far as social justice and educational curriculum that is inclusive. They know. I mean, they are our future. And so I think what needs to happen is the listening and the honoring of what they need. They can tell us, and then we can create those programs around that, which is what I'm hearing you say.
Absolutely, we need to answer that call. We saw our Black youth leaders as well. They provided clear demands, and I do believe that we can do it. Santa Barbara community, we can do it. We can respond to this, to these demands, and let's bring our inherited characteristics that I believe we all do have, but get lost as we confront adversities and challenges and barriers in the world as we navigate this life, right? Let's tune back to our creativity, our innovation, our childlike ways of being to be able to create this positive change alongside each other. So glad to hear that that's moving forward, but and hopefully those listening, let's explore fearlessly what those characteristics can be like and what we can come up with together. So glad to hear that, but definitely have to listen and answer that call.
Yeah, absolutely. And after that, I had Shakir on, who was one of the young men who organized those protests, and he was very articulate about what was going on. And I want to now, and I will, establish a Compassion Center Live on Facebook, which would be just youth talking to the community and to each other about what's going on in their lives, because I want to give them a platform for dialogue to the broader community. But you brought up a very important point about mental health education in youth and younger children, in understanding emotion, social emotional learning, that so many families really don't have. They're emotionally illiterate. They don't understand, as you said, what the differences are in these emotions. I grew up in my family was stereotyped. The man was this way, the woman was this way. And I had to learn about feelings, like what are feelings? And I think the earlier that we can educate children and also have opportunities to educate parents on, just the natural developmental stages to learn about emotions. I think you're so right on with that, because it starts there. All this, we're dealing with the aftermath of trauma, neglect, abuse.
Well, and we're still living it. We're still in this pandemic. It's so real. Absolutely. Huge advocate for mental health education for all, from 0 to 5 to higher ed.
That's your passion. That's what
and you know what? I fell into this passion because of my status, right? And not being able to maybe be certified as a teacher. Although I am documented, and there comes some privilege with that now. For example, being able to work and have a job. But it's important to educate as early as possible, and also start. I would challenge, as the educator that I am, even though I fell into this field because I was that student that, supposedly was lazy, was not able to do, able to succeed, wasn't able to finish high school, or whatever, any stereotype that has been said to me in our education system. It's important to address, all this knowledge at an early age, and we should definitely, this is a call for everyone in the United States, we should definitely be funding more of the early ages to be able to do not just the mental health education work, but as well as the work around social justice, equity, inclusion, diversity, and name that. We should start learning about racism and stereotypes from a very young age, because that's when we start consuming all these messages, and it's important for us to stop it from the beginning. We need to go to the root of the cause and start early. So as far as the social justice work I do, that's another thing that I've seen our communities ask for and need. You see them, I've observed, especially families, they understand what, they kind of start exploring what's going on, but there's still that need to elevate and enhance, and bring to light, like Tara Yoso believes in, right? Her models of cultural wealth models. So look at all those capitals: linguistic capital, cultural capital, and really allow to lead from that root to be able to, help our families and communities find the voice that is already within them, and just help them magnify it so that they're able to clearly ask what they need and want. So oftentimes as practitioners, we send out surveys, we ask, some serious questions, but we should be challenging ourselves to discover, how can we look at all those practices, to better work with the community.
And I think when you were talking about surveys, René, and you and I talked about this earlier, there are many families and youth, whatever, that don't have access to being able to the internet and even phones. I mean, you were describing situations. Are we really paying attention enough to getting the families and the youth what they need to be able to navigate right now?
Yeah, first and foremost, we have to credit ourselves, right? We do have to applaud all the systems and all the resources that Santa Barbara does have, from the district to family service agency to any entity, a resource. Yes, let's celebrate, our accomplishments and how we're trying our best to support community. But yeah, I think what you mentioned of, are we really listening? I think that's a great question that we should be asking ourselves daily, as we ourselves, implicit bias is real. We have to constantly check ourselves and our privileges, whether they were inherent or earned, to continue serving the community. So what I have noticed and what I can speak to is, specifically for the undocumented populations that I work with, in regards to some of the financial aid supports and stuff, there's so many that still have not received or been able to even go and think about getting these resources, because some of the families and folks that I work with, are, you mentioned it, can't write or can't read because their education level, just like my parents, my dad didn't go to school at all, and my mom only went up to the 2nd grade. So, and there's so many more like them. Our farm workers that are out in the fields, right? The different languages we speak. There's so many barriers and challenges to it, but realities that I think we need to pay more attention to as authentic servant leaders, to serve the community. So one story that I did want to share was that, I've had a handful of folks that don't have access to telephones. And I'm guilty of this too. I will be the first to call myself out. I assumed because we're in this digital era that everyone had access to telephones or computers or Wi-Fi or whatever it was. And I learned very quickly in this pandemic that folks don't have that access. So they're trying to get these services, sometimes with broken screens on their flip phones. I met several folks that still have flip phones, and I say that because I thought everybody had a smartphone, but that's not the reality. So there's so much more work that we can do. In particular, one folk didn't have a phone, and he couldn't access the funds for 805 Undocu Fund or other resources. And I really had to work with that person to connect, and work collaboratively. And as soon as that happened, more folks started, you know, by word of mouth, because that's how our community communicates. More started coming in and trickling in, and it was overwhelming for me as an individual to take on all those cases. Luckily, you know, there were other volunteers that came together as community, but I'd like to challenge ourselves in our procedures, right? And ask ourselves that question: are we really listening? Are our procedures inclusive? Are they open to everyone? Yeah, so just that was one story of many. As far as undocu folks as well, just in the last 4 days, I received many calls of undocumented students really still being in limbo. Since we know, quick little info, right now, undocumented students can't file for DACA. So there is this whole group, a generation of students who are undocumented, who have these beliefs that they can't go to college, that they can't access XYZ, and we must do better. That's my call today, as the person and leader that I want to be and become, and in the work that I have been doing. So I know that was something you wanted me to speak about today. Some of the work that I have been doing has been around what we've been talking. So one, really advocating for mental health in our education system for everyone. And through that project, I wanted to announce today Bienestar Latinx, which is a platform, you know, with the goal of empowering our Latinx community specifically to take control of their mental health, their emotional and physical health. So that is something that I am co-founder of with our founder, Ali Cortez, and another co-founder, Irene Kelly, who are amazing women and leaders. And I'm so humbled to be working with them with that initiative. Other projects and things that I'm involved with in the community. I do a lot of undocumented youth and education awareness, really utilizing diversity, inclusion, and equity lens. And the questions that I ask there in that work are really, how do we continue to make spaces inclusive and safe for our undocumented students who are not documented, which is completely different, like myself, right, who have these benefits now, temporary benefits, as well as how do we train folks? I received some calls this week that folks are, in regards to seniors going into college, they're not being aware of the California Dream Act, which is specifically for undocumented students to apply for financial aid, state aid. So there's a lack of knowledge that I'm seeing, and awareness for undocumented students, and I really would love to explore and see, like, how can we work as a community to help these students, and not just, and to clarify too, not just Latinx undocumented students or Hispanic or Chicana students. We're talking about Black undocumented students as well. That need is very critical, and how do we better support them? Because I'm not kidding. I've received handfuls of calls the last 4 days, all about, hey, how can I work as an undocumented folk? Can I go to college? Can I get financial aid? And for me, I know I was lucky to have some of those resources growing up, because the AB 540 Coalition in Santa Barbara existed. That was led by a collaborative of organizations, and would love, I guess it's another call to action. I'd love to explore how just communities and myself and others in the community can come together to maybe pick that back up and start sharing knowledge around what it is to be undocumented, what it is to be documented, what it is to be XYZ, and share that history of undocumentation in our world, and move forward to be allies and better support our youth and communities. So those are some things I'm up to of the many roles that I play. And lastly, just communities will also be launching learning pods on September 14th. And this idea came about, we've seen it. I just saw that LA Unified School District is doing something similar. And I know that the Boys and Girls Club also here in town has done something but similar to the district model, where it's for their employees. So just communities will be taking on this effort, starting September 14th to launch 5 locations, where we'll help our families most in needs by referral, to help them and provide them that safe and secure space, following all CDC guidelines, really working with other leaders in the community like Kathy Serrano, Daisy Estrada, Melinda Cabrera from United Way, Melinda Hodge, working with them to to provide this for free for our some families in the community. So that's exciting for us as just communities, as we really put action to access. So we're really gonna act on it and provide this access for students and families so that they can tune in and work and actually tune into their classes, learn and be part of that online instruction.
So what you're offering are these pods at different locations where youth can go and study, do their schoolwork, access to the internet and all the services they might not have at home. Is that?
Absolutely, yes. This came out from, we were hearing, right, in the work that we do, so more of the barriers and challenges that we're hearing. And that's what, let's name it. There's a difference between equality and equity. So we've done our equality part, right? Everyone has hotspots, you know, but the equity pieces, now we need to meet them where they're at individually. And we're hoping to bridge that access through these learning pods pilot program to connect them to Wi-Fi. They'll have a tutor on site that will be able to help them connect, but stay focused in instruction, help them with their homework or activities that the teachers are giving. Also, shout out to the teachers. You're all doing your best. We appreciate the students, love you. Every youth is telling me, I love my teacher. They're trying their best. So you're seen and heard, teachers. But yeah, this is just our little scent, and we hope that the community can see this. We'll be doing very low ratios, 5-to-1. So keeping it way below the 14-to-1 ratio suggested by the CDC or public health. Sorry. So yeah, we're excited. We'll be working with Casa de la Raza, Ellings Park, to be creative and innovative. Back to that, right? Of how can we truly be there for our families as a community, and connect and collectively support them so that this achievement gap doesn't continue to widen.
That's so important, René. And people can get information by contacting Just Communities if
Absolutely. I will be the person to contact. So I could share my work email with you, and I'd be more than happy to see how. Let's discuss, let's collaborate and see how we can continue to help more families and students.
This is so valuable. I so appreciate everything that you're doing and your sentiments for our families in the community, that people may not be aware of some of the needs. And before we end today, I just wanted to ask you for any closing thoughts, sentiments, anything you'd like to share before we end?
Sure. Well, you asked me a question, and the question was, what's in my heart? And I want to leave us with, in my heart, as in all the roles that I play as a program coordinator, a board member, as a co-founder, as an authentic servant leader, in my heart, there's hope, there's love, there's action, and there's solidarity. And I act on it. That is the root of how I do the work that I do. So I encourage others to continue to do what they do, and let's communicate now more than ever, to reframe and reimagine what the public education system can look like, what nonprofit sector can look like, and let's have those authentic conversations of how we can genuinely work together. And also, because I'm a huge advocate for mental health, in particular for the Latinx communities, let's work with Bienestar Latinx, and let's really be intentional about interweaving wellness, grounding activities, and well-being into all our practices, into all our systems, so that we can continue to work alongside our youth, our young adults, our children, and our families, and most importantly, as community, to create this positive and just change. So I'm so blessed to have been here, and those would be my final words.
It's beautiful, René. Thank you for your work. Really appreciate you, and I hope you appreciate, also take a moment to appreciate what you're doing and who you are. And Just Communities is there, and Santa Barbara Response Network, Bienestar, which people will hear more about, which I'm very excited to be part of also with you all. So the Santa Barbara Response Network, if you need more information, sbresponsenetwork.org. Please get a hold of us, Just Communities as well. We're there for you, or any of these needs, any of the issues that were brought up today, we're here for you, and please reach out.
Absolutely. And
Have a
I lied. One more message. Undocumented students and families, there are resources for you. I am here for you. I do commit to that. People that know me know I will be there for you. So there are those resources that I'll share with Gina, like the 805 Undocu Fund, United Ways supporting, Immigrant Rising is a great resource. So you're not alone. Undocumented students listening, you're not alone in this. We're here.
Yeah, and we'll put those resources up and we'll share them. And thank you for having this conversation and talking about the issues that we haven't been addressing as openly as we could. Thank you for sharing your personal story, and have a wonderful evening. And thank you, everyone. And
Muchas gracias.
gracias.